All right. Petrina, thank you so much for joining us to Superbio Scientist Spotlight. As per tradition, can you please tell the Superbio community about yourself?
Well, what would you like to know?
Well, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your career from your grad school all the way to Insilico Medicine, and what do you do outside of work?
Okay, perfect. So I'm a computational chemist by training. I did my PhD in theoretical chemistry in Montreal, Canada at Concordia University. Since then, I've been working in the field of computer-aided drug discovery and drug design in various different roles, from support roles to business development roles. And I joined Insilico Medicine, and I also worked in market access, so all the way from preclinical drug discovery and development, all the way up to commercialization. I joined Insilico Medicine almost 4 years ago, leading their Chemistry 42 team in terms of the strategy, business development, building out the roadmap basically for the platform. And now I'm global head of AI platforms. We opened up an entity in Montreal, and I'm president of Insilico Medicine Canada as well. What do I do
What?
outside?
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
Well, I live in Montreal, so I have to be adaptable to amenable to the weather changes. So in the winter, I love to ski. In the summer, I like to bike. Um, and in the fall and spring, do everything in between, hiking. Yeah.
Um, are you from Canada?
No, I'm originally from Uganda. I was born
Yeah,
and I grew up in Kenya before moving to Montreal.
gotcha. And what led you to pursue a career in AI? I'm curious about your biggest motivation to continue working in this field.
Basically identifying inefficiencies throughout my career in the drug discovery and development process. Most prominently when I was working in market access. There's a lot of grunt work involved in building up these global value dossiers that I felt could be automated and done in a more intelligent way. But also throughout preclinical drug discovery and drug development. Throughout my career, as machine learning techniques were becoming more and more well suited towards addressing the challenges associated with drug discovery and development, I began to see how they could definitely expedite the process and make the process more data driven in terms of decision making.
Hmm.
That to me
I've
was
I've understood. I've also seen today you're one of the subjects of the AI Revolution documentary premiering on PBS NOAA. I'm
yes.
curious, what was it like to be in front of cameras talking about AI? And I'm assuming your work at Insilico Medicine.
It was extremely daunting. So they came to Montreal um, basically to interview two people, myself and Joshua Bengio. Um, and the idea behind talking to a company like Insilico Medicine was to sort of take a perspective that was not daunting when it comes to applying AI in an industry. There's a lot of negative or fear associated with the adoption of AI in many different industries and in just day-to-day life. But the story of how you can use AI to expedite the discovery and development of therapeutics so that you could have maybe more options on the market in the long term, decrease the costs associated with discovering drugs and make this sort of capabilities more democratized is a good news story. And so far, Insilico Medicine has demonstrated that you can, at least in an incremental sense, make a difference in preclinical drug discovery and development. And hopefully we'll demonstrate this as more and more of our products enter the clinic and then get commercialized. So it was a good news story that they wanted to have and add that perspective, that nuance towards the adoption of AI in a different industry.
Well, that segues really nicely into our next question. We know that you're someone whose experience has, been at every link in the chain of end-to-end drug development, right? All the way through commercialization. So we'd love to get a little more granular. Which steps in the process of drug development do you believe to be the most rate limiting? And which of those are best positioned to be accelerated by AI machine learning?
Well, we've gone step by step, and we started at the very beginning where it was a huge challenge, and it still is a very huge challenge to identify targets associated with diseases. So diseases tend to involve many different pathways, many different proteins are implicated. Many things go wrong with a disease, but identifying the right target that is implicated in a disease is something that is very, very challenging, but amenable to machine learning and AI, because you can take different data types, right, and try to come up to a common conclusion, right? So this target is implicated in this disease, and there's evidence to support that implication on many different levels. That's the very beginning. And then there's the very end of the drug discovery and development process. It's the regulatory, commercialization, clinical trials. I do believe that all of those processes are very, very much bottlenecks in the process. Clinical trials, you cannot shorten them, right? But you can help by selecting the right patient population, and AI can help you do that. You can help the process by identifying sites where you can run clinical trials more successfully. AI can help you do that. In terms of regulatory, I think that's kind of still up in the air. You know, there's a lot of laws associated with that, and processes that may be beyond AI, but it's another bottleneck in the process. How can we get more drugs approved? Maybe AI can help there as well. This is something I'm not really familiar with. And then again, market access. Definitely AI can help in building those, helping you build those cases. You can build a large language model to do that. That will show that your particular drug is something that should be on the health technology agency's formularies. So all of this to say, many different stages are amenable towards leveraging AI. But those bottlenecks are the ones at the very beginning, tend to be very beginning, and then at the very end of the process.
Interesting. And when we think about the very beginning and sort of molecular approaches, leveraging machine learning, it strikes me that your background in quantum chemistry is likely very helpful in your day-to-day work, right? Can you give some examples of how your scientific training impacts your day-to-day?
So initially, it didn't really. So quantum chemistry in drug discovery and drug development was not the main sort of technology used. It was more molecular mechanics, which is more physics-based methods as opposed to quantum-based methods. But now, with the advance of technology, quantum chemistry is coming back, and with the development of quantum computing as well, it's beginning to make inroads in drug discovery and drug development that could be very impactful. But that being said, molecular modeling is molecular modeling. And while I did my PhD in quantum chemistry, most of my career was leveraging molecular mechanics, so those physics-based methods, towards drug discovery and drug development and cheminformatics. But yeah.
No, it sounds like an important distinction that is likely lost on a lot of our listeners. So thanks for clarifying. I'd love to shift gears a little bit and ask you a little bit about an interview that you did last year with the Cambridge Innovation Institute. You mentioned a partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, leveraging the Chemistry 42 platform to help design non-hormonal contraceptives. What can you share about this project?
So this project is part of the grand challenges that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are going after. And they are not called grand challenges for no reason. These are proper, serious challenges. For example, if you're going to go after contraception, you're going after a population of young, fertile, otherwise healthy human beings. We've been tasked to come up with molecules that are extremely safe, right? So they cannot cause any, even minor side effects, because any minor side effects will result in people not taking them. But also have different modalities, so different ways that will let young people be able to access the medication. Not everyone wants to take a pill every day. Not everyone wants to take a pill every month. Not everyone wants to have something inserted in their arm or wherever. So different ways that different formulations or different ways that you can deliver the contraception. Those are two of the main challenges. The other is just trying to understand what targets you can go after. This was what I spoke to you about before, that are non-hormonal, but they're working on a hormonal pathway, right? Your fertility cycle is controlled by hormones. So if you're looking for a non-hormonal target, what is that target going to be? Is it druggable? And all of those are huge challenges that not only us, but other companies as well are coming together to try and address, leveraging our different strengths and our different technologies and expertise to try and go after these challenges. So far, I don't think anyone within this consortium will say that this is easy. We all appreciate the difficulty that this is. But what I really like about it is that we do have different brains and different technologies looking into this, and we also have different groups. So we have social workers working with people from all over the world. So these medications have to be cheap, right, and readily available. So they're talking to people from different communities, young people from different communities, to understand what would be the best solution for them, and bringing that to us so that we can keep that in mind when we're trying to design these molecules. So it's a very different way of thinking about developing drugs, but I really like it, and it's also a huge challenge. And if we were to succeed, I think it would be groundbreaking, all over the world, I think, because fertility is very important, right?
I'm curious, how do you think about the accessibility, which I think is quite important, especially in this project? How does it influence the design of the design process of the drug? Does it influence the way it is designed, the sort of considerations that go into it, the amount of money that's being spent on it? How is that ingrained into the design process?
Well, if you're going to make something, say like an oral pill, right, that is cheap, it has to be easy to make. So it can't be a molecule that takes 20 different steps to synthesize and 8 months for one molecule, and then you have to what do they call it? Scale up, right? So you have to create enough of that molecule and enough of those pills in order to distribute them around the world. So the formulation and the cost that that is involved with synthesizing the molecules is something that we have to take into consideration when we're designing them in order to make them accessible. Also storage, right? So, you want to create enough so that you don't run out and you don't have to keep making them, is something that you have to bear in mind. But that's, again, formulation.
Right. No, thank you for that answer. It sounds like a really interesting and just ambitious, far-reaching project, and a big challenge, as you say. Speaking of challenges in general, for the traction of AI in the life sciences, I'm curious, in your own work, what have you seen as the greatest obstacles in realizing the full potential of deep learning in drug discovery and development? Or in other words, what is our most significant gap in knowledge?
Most significant gap in knowledge, I think, is just people understanding what exactly this all is, right? So a lot of people have a different definition of what AI is. A lot of people are very biased in terms of what they think their understanding is. So you'll hear a lot of people talk about data. Data is very important. You need to have a lot of data in order for you to train a model. And that's true in certain aspects, but not in every aspect. And when you're using, for example, generative AI versus predictive models, those are very, very different applications of artificial intelligence or machine learning. When you have a generative algorithm, you don't have to have massive amounts of data to train a generative algorithm. And once you've trained it, it's going to do what it's been trained to do. So it's smart, but not crazy smart. It's just going to do whatever it's been taught how to do. And then if you wrap that up with a reinforcement learning algorithm, then you can punish it or reward it based on, but just that very narrow scope, right? And in our case, we're using it to generate molecules. With predictive models, you're trying to predict properties associated with the molecules. And there, the training data set that you use to train the model has to be diverse enough to be applicable to many different types of molecules. So the diversity in the data that you use to train the model is something. And then you can keep training the model depending on which types of molecules you have and you want to predict the properties of. So they're predictive algorithms and they're generative algorithms, two different use cases. You can't just fold that all into one and say every single model needs huge amounts of data in order for it to be a good model. So all of this to say, the knowledge gap is in basically just understanding what AI is and how the different use cases and how it can be applied, and that there's no one, massive definition for what is being implemented, especially in our space.
I mean, agreed. I think especially public discourse within the last year kind of reduced AI specifically into large language models. I mean, last year it completely changed how we talked about AI and what we call AI. I'm curious, as a chemist, as a scientist, how do you see the opportunities and challenges generative AI? And I know Insilico Medicine is one of the first companies that uses generative AI technologies in life sciences and molecular development. But how do you see, I guess, the current technologies coupled with the existing ones that Insilico Medicine have already been using, the opportunities and challenges they pose in drug development space?
So you mentioned large language models, and now they're multimodal large models, or whatever you want to call them. The challenge there is in the hallucination, right? So how do you ensure that they don't produce information that is untrue? And make sure that whoever's using them keeps that in mind and really checks whatever information they get from any of these large language models, and make sure that whatever they get is actually true. That's a big challenge. And if we just were to take them and wildly apply them and say, this large language model is going to generate molecules for you, and these molecules are going to be great, without validating the output, there's a big danger there. And there are a lot of people who are doing that, which is it's just not right. So in order to avoid that, validate whatever output comes out of your large language model, et cetera. In terms of how we're combining what we've created before with, say, Copilot or any other sort of large language model, is we're creating agents so that you can control different platforms by just using one engine, one Copilot, for example. That comes from Microsoft, and which is great. So you're limiting the use of this model to your products and what the capabilities of the products. There's still the danger that the model can go off and say, I don't need to talk to your products. I'm going to go off into the internet and come up with a solution for you. That has happened. So you still have to be aware of that. And that's still a problem and a challenge.
So I'm understanding that you're kind of developing AI scientists or automated labs or sort of agentic models that is specializing for one application and that can sort of talk with each other, right? So it's kind of almost like, I don't know, building an AI PhD student or an AI postdoc that helps you do one type of thing really, really well, sort of working with systems of different AI models. Would that be a right description?
It's an enabling technology. So one thing that I found that as I was going through grad school and then going through work is there's so much information out there that I cannot read every single paper associated with a particular topic. So in order for me, and I found this quite useful, to be able to digest a lot of that information, is I can use a large language model to help, piece that together, dilute it down into something that is understandable. But I know that I need to go back and check. Not by reading those thousands of papers, but just to make sure that my understanding is what is actually supposed to be. That's what I'd say it's helping with information filtering and helping us manage the information load that we have. Because it's a large language model, you can have information from omics data, from biology, from chemistry, from clinical trials, all digested and given to you in one format or one sort of chattable way. So you can ask, this large language model questions or this knowledge graph questions within a specific disease area. So I think they're very helpful tools in that sense, as opposed to replacing people. They're tools as far as I'm concerned. They're enabling tools. Yeah.
Do you feel it has made you, besides the drug development process, do you feel it has made you more productive in your day-to-day work using large language model tools?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I give a lot of presentations. I do. It is very, very helpful to me in my day-to-day compared to 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And now I do heavily rely on getting information and building stories, understanding papers using large models. Again, with that caveat, but it has definitely, I leverage them. Yeah, definitely.
Are there any specialized tools that you use for literature review, synthesis, analyses, especially for that day-to-day work that you do?
Yeah, we have our own internal paper chatting large
Amazing.
language model that we we leverage heavily inside the company to keep up with the literature. Whatever's out there, I just upload the papers onto this particular platform and chat with it. So we do that. We developed our own.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Of course. I'm curious, looking beyond, again, therapeutics, are there any subsectors of the biotech industry that excites you in terms of AI having an effect in it, agriculture or synthetic biology, whatever that might be?
Absolutely. And Insilico Medicine has taken, well, we're involved in a couple of other industries. So we are, we've been involved in the agrochemistry industry. So we have a partnership with Syngenta, where we were tasked with coming up with novel herbicides. So this is an interesting challenge because there's not too much novelty in this area in terms of structures and compounds, but they have slightly different challenges to developing a drug. One, you don't want to harm the bugs and you don't want to harm your other plants, the good plants that you want. You just want to go after the herbs, right? The weeds. And then you have to make sure that they're soluble and they won't get drained into our water system and affect humans, right? So you also have to be aware of human tox. And then because, agriculture is vast, you can't come up with molecules that are too complicated because you have to make these molecules, these compounds at scale. And it's massive scale, right? Because you're going to spray these herbicides on vast, large swaths of land. So different challenges and different properties that we have to optimize the molecules for, but very interesting. We've also entered into a collaboration with Aramco on creating clean tech. So that's something else we're looking at. We're also looking at collaborations in generating vaccines. That's still in the healthcare space. We're looking at materials. So yeah, we're very diverse in terms of our interests. And so
yes, sounds like very active and head of AI platforms of the whole company. You must be looking at all these different sectors. That sounds amazing. I'm curious, like looking back on this whole journey, what advice would you give to aspiring researchers who's looking to make waves in the biospace, just like you're doing today?
I would say just keep being curious. Being a scientist and not just focusing on one particular area of science is something that will open up the world of opportunities for you. Because being a scientist basically just boils down to being able to understand complex things, complex situations, and trying to find problems to help resolve anything that's complex, and it's a challenge to, and is a challenge. And if you're interested in many different areas, then you'll have the ability to potentially be successful by just being a scientist. And don't be afraid and say, oh, I don't understand the petrochemical industry, therefore I cannot go into the petrochemical industry. Just be open and be curious, and you can learn how to apply your skills in other industries, not just one particular industry. And that increases your odds of being successful.
Yeah, it seems like the technology is changing so fast that what a lot of us initially trained for may or may not be relevant to our current work, right? Or the work of the future. So I hope you don't mind, but we have sort of a fun signature question that we like to ask near the end of interviews. And we ask you to imagine a hypothetical future where the year is 2222. We ask, what did AI do to our lives? Are we living forever, or is it a 1984-esque world where people all live under the rule of one big evil corporation?
I'm going to be optimistic. I'm always optimistic. And I'll say that, and we're kind of heading there. We are living longer anyway. And I think that what we are hoping to achieve, especially companies like Insilico, is helping us live healthier for longer. So increasing our health span so that, for example, by the time you're 60 years old, you don't have 3 or 4 chronic diseases under your belt And so that by the time you're 70, your life is not that, your quality of life is not that great. We would like it for it to be such that we can go after these hallmarks of aging, these processes that result in our bodies breaking down, and delay the onset of chronic disease, so that by the time you're 70 or 80, your quality of life is like it was for a 40 or 50-year-old now. Because we are living for longer, I think we can leverage AI to develop technologies that will help us live healthier for longer. That's it.
Gotcha. And then we always like to ask, what's next for you in your career or life, Petrina?
If I knew, I don't know. What would I do? I have no idea what's next for me, but I do hope that I continue to be challenged and I continue to learn, and hopefully that I will make a positive impact wherever I end up. Wherever I end up. That's it.
Well, thank you so much for being part of the Super Bioscientist Spotlight series, Petrina. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Berka and Eva.